Another interest, this is Don talking about the sonnets. This is another interesting book in my collection. It says The Book Known as Q by Robert Garox, 1982 published. Subtitled A Consideration of Shakespeare's Sonnets. So I went into the index and looked for sonnet 23, and it's not one of the ones that is listed here in the index, but after sonnet 21, there's a comma and then 23. So I looked on page 23 to see if there was a mention of sonnet 21, and I didn't see any mention. So I'm assuming that sonnet 23 would be mentioned on the same page as 21, which is page 138. But when I went to 138, I couldn't find any mention of sonnet 23. So there might be a mention of 23 in this book someplace, but I'm not going to look through every page to try to find it. But I suspect that the indexer made a mistake. So anyways, this copy that I have is a paperback, and it's getting quite old. The pages are very brown, and when I open it up, I just feel like shortly it's going to start falling apart, so I probably should get a hardcover copy of this book, which probably isn't that hard to find on eBay or someplace. But in regards to, I'd like to get more information on this sonnet 23. Because as I was mentioning, Psalm 23 talks about the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, in the King James. So want, it means the same thing as lacks nothing. So if you're saying you lack nothing, if that's what this sonnet is saying, I'll have no fear, I will lack nothing. What is it referring to? Well, the one line that really sticks out, and then the rest of the sonnet seems to make a little bit more sense, is line number 12. More than that tongue that more hath more expressed. Well, who's that talking about? It could be talking about Christ, because like in the New Testament, it says that I don't recall where it's located, what verse it is in the Bible, but it says we are complete in Christ. And when you look up the word complete in Greek that was used in that passage, it's a threefold completeness. It means completely complete. You're not just complete, you're completely complete. So this tongue, the only thing I can come up with is Marlowe, because Marlowe died in 1593, and that's about the time these poems were circulated. They might have existed prior to that time, but so what I'm trying to come up with is a phrase for what I'm doing. It's like the riddle resolved, or the truth revealed, or what did it say here? The tongue resurrected. So it's kind of a romance, I don't know how you're going to prove something like this, but if you look at Henry Rosley, or Roseley, however you pronounce his last name, and De Vere and Shakespeare, It's kind of like the Three Musketeers. They're set out on the purpose of keeping alive Marlowe, I think, is what's going on. And so it's not these sonnets, I believe, are Edward de Vere's writing, but he dedicates, or his dedication is to W.H. So instead of that being the initials of Henry Roseley, turned around, maybe it's just William and Henry. It's the two other guys that he's dedicating these poems to. So it does show that there is some kind of relationship between these three poets. We don't know that the third person, Henry, is a poet, but we can sort of postulate that his poetry was published under another name, possibly Thomas Watson, I've heard mentioned. So we have these three poets who set themselves on the task or the goal of resurrecting Marlowe. Marlowe's the playwright. None of these guys are proficient. There might be other people involved as well, but you have the heart, mind, and soul of this endeavor are those three persons. So if you want to consider that the body, then the spirit is Marlowe himself. And whether Marlowe was still alive, he's supposedly murdered in 1593, but that's going to be hard to prove because, if I think what we can infer is that if Marlowe does anything in public again, he's going to be arrested, whatever, charged with blasphemies. So everything that these three poets are trying to do, others have even mentioned that Shakespeare was Marlowe because it's so similar. Phrases and lines are nearly identical. Well, I think this is intentional. They're trying to reproduce because he's gone. They're trying to. If you read that first book I mentioned, Shakespeare by Another Name, what De Vere, Vere, the name Vere, comes from, I think it's the Latin veritas, which means truth. So De Vere starts out by warning Roseley and Shakespeare that the Cecils have taken over. Queen Elizabeth her power has diminished, and now the Cecils are controlling things, through secret arrangements. And so I think the son's name of Lord Burleigh was Robert Cecil. So they have to kind of watch themselves kind of do these things secretly so that they're not caught. Yeah. They've got three persons so that if one person were to disappear mysteriously or something, the work is going to go on. They've kind of, taken the, what's the word, truce or whatever. They've made their vow to to do this work. So even if De Vere died in 1604, which is not totally, he could have still been around after his supposed death. But it does appear that William at least continued the work. So that's just my romance about things, and then I look for further proofs of that in my reading, but nothing else really makes sense to me. All this esoteric stuff about, it almost seems more Baconian. But if you stick with those four persons, Marlowe, De Vere, Shakespeare, and Rosalie, I think it makes a little bit more sense than other things I've heard. It doesn't make much sense to me that these guys would put secret messages in their writings to show that there was some kind of scandal or something in their lives. Why would you do that? It doesn't make a lot of sense. All right, well, that's it for now.